If you currently work for a private company and you were granted RSUs, but then there's an announcement that your company is getting ready to go public, then what does that mean for your RSUs? Well, today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the way that it can work and a few of the things to think about from a planning perspective. So first, before we get started, it's important to understand the basics of RSUs. So if you don't know that, then there's another video that I did on RSU Basics that I'd encourage you to check that out first and then come back to this one. And then also with equity compensation in private companies, there's a lot of different ways that they can be structured. And so I'm going to talk about one common way that it's structured, but it might be different for your particular situation. So if you're unsure, then I'd encourage you to reach out to a CFP professional that focuses on equity compensation like myself or somebody else. As I covered in my last video, RSUs are granted to you and then there's a vesting schedule that is tied to it. And so in this example, we're going to say we're granted 4,000 RSUs and then every year you get 1,000 of them. And so in normal circumstances at a public company, then whenever this 1,000 would vest here, then that would become taxable income to you, and then you have the option of selling the stock, or you could hold it. But the thing is, with a private company, then whenever this year goes by, and then if 1,000 shares would vest here, then it would be taxable income to you, but you would actually have no way of turning that into cash. So to fix this, a common way that private companies will structure their RSUs is that they'll do something called double trigger vesting. So with double trigger vesting, the reason why it helps is that, as the name implies, there's actually two things that have to happen in order for these RSUs to fully vest. So the first one is time, and that is very similar to regular RSUs in the fact that, if you start working at this company and you're granted these RSUs, then you have to stick around for 1 year, 2 years on in order for those to become yours. And so that's the first trigger that has to happen. But then where it's different is that there's the second trigger, and it's some event. And so in our example, we're going to talk about an IPO. And so that IPO will be the second event that will trigger the RSUs to vest. So how does this look like in practice? So with your company saying that they're going to IPO, and then once that happens, then it's really great news, because all of these years of your hard work, then you're able to turn this bonus into cash. But then what it also means is that in this 1 year, then that's going to skyrocket your taxable income compared to all of your previous years. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still a champagne problem, but it's still no fun to have to pay a whole bunch of taxes. One quick clarification is that the actual event a lot of times isn't just the IPO day, that it's IPO plus the lockup period, because that lockup period is saying that, okay, after it IPOs, as an employee, you still can't sell yet. And so it's not till after that lockup period that the actual second trigger happens. And then that would be the date that would be considered taxable income to you. So here's our situation. So now that your company has IPO'd and then you're past the lockup period and all these RSUs have vested, then that means your income for this year has skyrocketed. And so what can you do to plan for this? So first, understand what your tax estimate's going to be and what tax bracket you're going to be in. Now remember that whenever your RSUs vest, then your employer is going to withhold an amount, but usually that is at 22%, and there's going to be a high likelihood that you're going to be in a higher tax bracket than that. The second thing you can do is try to defer as much income as possible to try to lower your income for the year. So common ways of doing that is by contributing into your 401k pre-tax and contributing into your HSA and maxing that out. Most importantly is give this money a job. So remember that whenever this happens, then it's going to come to you in a lot of stock in your company. And so if you're intentional and you've given it a job, then you can be a lot clearer in making that decision of how much to hold, how much to sell and just cash out, how much to invest elsewhere, and then how much to donate. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out javawealth.com if you want more information, and I'll talk to you guys later.